I found my son cleaning and scrubbing bathrooms. His mother-in-law laughed. It's all he knows how to do. So I stepped out and made a call. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The voicemail was 11 seconds long. No words, just breathing. Then a whisper, "Dad," and the line went dead. I played it 14 times before I grabbed my keys. Have you ever received a call that made your stomach drop before you even answered? The kind where your hand freezes over the screen and something in your chest already knows. 11 months. My son hadn't spoken to me in 11 months. Missed Thanksgiving, missed Christmas. Missed the anniversary of his mother's death, the one day he never forgot, not once in 20 years. And now this. One word. Like a distress signal from someone drowning. What would you find at the other end of that drive? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But I got in my car anyway, because that's what fathers do. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm 71 years old. I spent 40 years designing guidance systems for commercial aircraft, the kind of work where a decimal point in the wrong place means 200 people don't make it home. Precision was my religion. Patience was my prayer. But that night in my Hartford home, watching the orange glow of my desk lamp flicker against Eleanor's photograph on the mantel, precision meant nothing. The phone buzzed. Unknown number, Greenwich area code. Greenwich, that's where Derek lived now. With her, with them. I let it ring twice before answering. No voice, just breathing. Shallow, controlled. The kind you make when you're trying not to cry. Then that whisper. Dad. And silence. I must have played that voicemail 14 times, pressing the phone against my ear like I could hear something hidden between the syllables. Something that would tell me what happened to my boy. Derek was 34 years old, a mechanical engineer with a degree from the University of Connecticut. Smart as they come. Steady hands, steady mind. He got that from his mother. Eleanor passed when Derek was 14. Cancer took her slow, then fast the way it does. I remember the day after her funeral, rain coming down sideways, and Derek standing in the driveway with a flat tire on his bike. Most kids would have left it, gone inside, cried into a pillow. Not Derek. He just stood there, staring at that tire like it owed him an explanation. So I walked out with a patch kit and knelt beside him in the mud. Didn't say anything about his mother. Didn't talk about grief or heaven or being strong. I just showed him how to find the puncture, how to sand the rubber, how to press the patch until it held. We fix what's broken, son, I told him. That's what Whitmore men do. He nodded, and we never spoke of it again. But that boy, the one who fixed things, who solved problems, who stood in the rain rather than surrender. Where did he go? Because the voice on that voicemail wasn't solving anything. That voice was asking to be found. If someone you loved went silent for almost a year, would you know the signs? Subscribe now. The warning comes before the silence does. And if you wouldn't, tell me why in the comments. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, the same hook Eleanor picked out 30 years ago. My keys sat in the ceramic bowl Derek made in 6th grade, lopsided and painted blue. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that reminds you nobody's coming home. The drive from Hartford to Greenwich takes about 2 hours if traffic behaves. It didn't, but I barely noticed. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my old Buick, cold leather, familiar grooves, and the highway lights blurred past like memories I couldn't catch. The mechanical hum of the engine was steady, reliable, the only thing that made sense. I thought about the last time I saw Derek. His wedding day, 4 years ago. He looked happy. Nervous, but happy. Vanessa was beautiful. Blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I noticed that. Eleanor would have noticed it too. And standing behind Vanessa like a shadow in silk was Constance Holloway, her mother. The woman who looked at my son the way you'd look at a stain on a white tablecloth. I should have said something then. But what do you say? Your mother-in-law doesn't blink when she smiles. Her handshake felt like a transaction. You don't say those things at weddings. You toast. You smile. You hope you're wrong. I wasn't wrong. The GPS told me I'd arrived, but the address led to a service entrance, hidden behind hedges trimmed sharp as knives. The main gate had a camera, an intercom, iron bars painted black. Money doesn't just build walls, it builds fortresses. The main gate was locked. The side door wasn't. 11 months of silence. One whispered word. What would it take for you to drive 2 hours into the unknown for someone you love? The bathroom was bigger than my kitchen. Italian marble floors, gold fixtures that caught the light like jewelry. A chandelier, hanging over a freestanding tub. And there, on his knees with a toothbrush, was my son. Derek didn't hear me come in. He was scrubbing grout between the tiles, his movements mechanical, practiced. Like he'd done this 1,000 times. His clothes were stained. Gray shirt, worn pants, the kind you'd wear for yard work, not the kind an engineer wears to anything. The smell hit me first. Bleach and lemon cleaner, mixed with something floral, expensive perfume drifting from somewhere deeper in the house. The rhythmic scratch of bristles against stone filled the silence. I stepped closer. My shoes made no sound on the cold marble. That's when I saw his hands. Cracked knuckles, red raw skin around his fingers, his wedding ring dulled and scratched, loose on a hand that had lost weight. These weren't the hands of a man who'd scrubbed one bathroom. These were hands that had been scrubbing for weeks, months maybe. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say his name, grab his shoulder, pull him to his feet. But something held me back. 40 years of engineering discipline, maybe. Or the knowledge that explosions don't fix anything. They just scatter the pieces further apart. So I watched. And I saw something that broke me in a place I didn't know could break. His posture. The way his shoulders curved inward, chin tucked, spine bent like a question mark. I'd seen that posture before. 20 years ago. Derek at 14, standing at Eleanor's grave while the pastor spoke words that meant nothing. But this was worse. Eleanor's death broke his heart. This, whatever this was, had broken something deeper. His spirit. His sense of who he was. The man kneeling on that marble floor wasn't my son. He was a ghost wearing my son's face. Derek still hadn't looked up. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the grout like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. Like if he just kept scrubbing, everything else would go away. That's when I heard the laugh. Not a kind laugh. Not a surprised laugh. A knowing laugh. The kind of laugh that's practiced in mirrors. It came from the doorway behind me. I turned slowly. A woman stood there. Mid-60s, maybe. Blonde hair styled like armor. A silk dress the color of champagne. And in her hand, actual champagne, half empty. Catching the light. 2 other women flanked her. Same age, same polish, same rehearsed amusement in their eyes. They looked at Derek the way you'd look at hired help who'd spilled something. The woman in the middle smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Nothing about her reached anything. "Oh," she said. "You must be the father." She looked me up and down like I was furniture delivered to the wrong address, and she was still smiling. "When was the last time you saw someone you love and didn't recognize them? Not their face, their spirit. It's really all he knows how to do." She said it like she was describing a dog that finally learned to fetch. The words hung in the air between us. Me, a 71-year-old man in a windbreaker, and Constance Holloway, Greenwich royalty, standing in the doorway of a bathroom that cost more than my first house. Her friends giggled. The sound was practiced, hollow. I looked at Derek. He hadn't moved, hadn't looked up. Just kept scrubbing, his jaws so tight I could see the muscle twitching beneath his skin. "The father from Hartford, yes?" Constance tilted her head, inspecting me. "Derek mentioned you were practical." Practical. That's what she called it. 40 years of precision engineering, patents with my name on them, systems flying in aircraft over 6 continents. Practical. I could feel the anger rising in my chest like steam in a boiler. Every instinct told me to speak, to defend my son, to tear this woman apart with words she wouldn't even understand. I designed guidance systems for aircraft that carried 200 souls. I could dismantle her in 6 sentences, but not yet. Not until I understood the full architecture of her cruelty. So I smiled. Polite, pleasant, the kind of smile you give at cocktail parties when someone says something idiotic and you can't afford to correct them. "Mrs. Holloway," I said, "what a lovely home." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't expecting that. People like Constance expect confrontation. They feed on it. Give them a target and they'll aim. But give them nothing, that unsettles them. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "we do try to maintain standards." She glanced at Derek. "Some of us more than others." Her friends laughed again. The sound scraped against my spine. I took a slow breath, let my eyes wander the room, and I started counting. Derek's hands, weeks of damage, maybe months. Vanessa's absence. His wife wasn't here, wasn't defending him, wasn't even present. And on the bathroom counter, a stack of opened mail. Envelopes addressed to Gerald Whitmore, slid open with a letter opener. Someone had been reading my son's mail. 3 data points, 3 pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. But I would. "I should let you get back to your party," I said, keeping my voice light. "I just wanted to see Derek, make sure he's settling in." Constance's smile widened. She thought she'd won something. "How thoughtful," she said. "Derek, say goodbye to your father." Derek stopped scrubbing. For a moment I thought he'd look at me. Speak. Give me something. A word, a glance, a sign that my son was still in there somewhere. But he just nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor, and muttered, "Goodbye, Dad." His voice was flat, empty, the voice of someone who's been hollowed out. I walked out the front door without another word. Past the garden party on the lawn, caterers in white shirts, guests holding wine glasses, laughter floating on the afternoon air, past the roses, trimmed into perfect spheres, past the fountain that probably cost more than Derek's education. I didn't stop until I reached my car. Then I pulled out my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. She answered on the second ring. "Gerald?" Patricia Vance's voice was sharp, familiar, and instantly alert. "It's been too long. What's wrong?" I looked back at the Holloway mansion. The white columns, the perfect hedges, the prison disguised as paradise. "Everything," I said, "and I need your help to fix it." He didn't yell. He didn't confront. He walked out and made a call. What would you have done? Exploded or strategized? Tell me everything, Patricia said. And Gerald, don't leave out the parts that make you angry. Those are usually the parts that matter. Patricia Vance was Eleanor's college roommate. They'd shared a dorm room at Yale, stayed close through law school, through marriages, through Eleanor's illness. When my wife died, Patricia delivered the eulogy. Now she was a semi-retired federal judge, sharp as a scalpel, patient as a surgeon, and the only person in the world who knew me well enough to call after 3 years of silence and say, "What's wrong?" instead of, "How are you?" I told her everything. The voicemail, the drive, the marble bathroom, Derek on his knees, Constance with her champagne and her practiced cruelty, the opened mail on the counter, the absence of Vanessa, the way my son couldn't look me in the eye. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. Then, is Vanessa complicit or captive? I don't know. Who controls Derek's finances? I don't know. When did the isolation begin? I don't know, Patricia. My voice cracked. That's why I'm calling. She sighed, not with frustration, with recognition, like she'd seen this before. The Holloways, she said slowly. I know that name. Old money, real estate. They've been in Greenwich for 3 generations. Very careful lawyers, very quiet scandals. What kind of scandals? The kind that gets sealed, the kind that cost 6 figures to make disappear. Patricia paused. Gerald, you need documentation. You need someone who can follow the money. I was an engineer for 40 years. I can follow. You can follow systems, she cut in. This isn't a system. It's a web. And you need someone who specializes in finding what people hide. She paused again. There's a man named Marcus Webb, forensic accountant, used to work for the IRS before he went private. He finds money the way bloodhounds find bodies. Hidden money, hidden abuse. Most people never find the trail until it's too late. Subscribe now, the next sign might be in your own family. Still not convinced? Drop your reason below. I wrote down the name. Marcus Webb. I'll call him tonight, I said. Good. And Gerald? Patricia's voice softened. Something rare for her. How are you? Really? I thought about Eleanor's photo on the mantel, the ceramic bowl Derek made in 6th grade, the empty chair at my kitchen table. I'm angry, I said. And that's good. Angry means I'm still fighting. Patricia laughed. A real laugh, warm and full. That's what Eleanor used to say about you. Gerald doesn't get sad. He gets strategic. My throat tightened. She would have handled this differently. She would have walked into that bathroom and held him until he remembered who he was. Then do both, Patricia said quietly. Hold him with one hand. Dismantle them with the other. That night, I sat in my study with papers spread across my desk. Legal pad? Blue pen? The same way I documented every project for 40 years. I made a timeline. When Derek and Vanessa met, when they married, when the calls started getting shorter, when the holidays started getting missed, when the silence became total. Eleanor's photograph watched from the mantel. I could almost hear her voice. Find the pattern, Gerald. There's always a pattern. The laptop glowed in the dark room as I began building my case. Patricia's last words before hanging up echoed in my mind. Gerald, one more thing. The Holloways have been sued before. Twice. Both cases settled quietly. Sealed records. Find out why. Sealed records. People only seal records when they have something to hide. Sealed records. Quiet settlements. What do you think the Holloways were hiding? Marcus Webb didn't look like a forensic accountant. He looked like a jazz musician who'd seen too much. Silver gray beard, wire-rimmed glasses, a rumpled blazer that had probably cost something once. When he sat across from me in that Hartford diner booth, he moved like a man who was used to waiting. This wasn't just any diner. This was Benny's, the same place I used to take Derek after Little League games. Same sticky vinyl seats, same laminated menus with coffee ring stains, same squeaky ceiling fan that nobody had fixed in 20 years. Some things stay the same while everything else falls apart. Patricia told me what happened, Marcus said, opening his laptop. But I want to hear it from you. The details, the things that bother you, the things that don't add up. I told him about Derek's career, his engineering degree, the job he'd landed at a manufacturing firm in Stamford, the salary that should have been $80,000 a year, easy. But when I saw him, I said, he looked like he didn't own 2 shirts. His wedding ring was loose. He'd lost weight, muscle, everything. Marcus nodded slowly. Where does he work now? I don't know. He stopped talking to me about work 2 years ago. Good. That tells me something. Marcus typed rapidly, his screen reflecting in his glasses. Give me a few days. I'll pull what I can. A week later, Marcus called me back to Benny's. Same booth, same squeaky fan. But his face was different. Tighter. Gerald, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Your son still has a job. Whitmore Manufacturing. Ironic, right? Same name as yours. He's been employed there for 5 years, making $87,000 annually. Then, where's the money? Marcus turned his laptop to face me. That's what I couldn't figure out at first. His salary is direct deposited every 2 weeks, regular as clockwork. But the account it goes into? He pointed to a line on the screen. It's not in Derek's name. I leaned closer. Whose name is it in? Vanessa Holloway Whitmore. Co-signed by a shell company called Holloway Property Holdings, LLC. My coffee went cold in my hand. There's more. Marcus flipped to another document. Look at this utility bill from the Holloway estate. See who's listed? I read it twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Under household members, it listed Constance Holloway, Vanessa Holloway Whitmore, and then Derek Whitmore, dependent. Dependent? My voice came out hoarse. He's a 34-year-old engineer. Not according to their paperwork. Marcus pulled out another sheet. This is his health insurance form, filled out 3 years ago. Look at the occupation field. I looked. Under occupation, someone had typed, household maintenance, household maintenance. My son, the mechanical engineer, reduced to 2 words that meant nothing. It's called financial isolation, Marcus said quietly. A form of domestic abuse. The victim earns money, but they never see it. They're told they're dependent, worthless, lucky to have a roof over their head. After a while, they believe it. Derek believes he has nothing. He believes he is nothing, Marcus corrected. That's the point. That's how they keep him. I stared at the documents. Bank statements, utility bills, insurance forms, a paper trail of erasure. I've seen this before, Marcus continued. Usually it's a spouse controlling the other. But a mother-in-law running the operation? He shook his head. That takes a special kind of architect. Constance didn't just steal his money, I said slowly. She rewrote who he was, on paper, in the system. She made him disappear while he was still standing right there. Marcus nodded. Then he paused on one document, enlarged it, leaned back in his seat. Gerald. His voice had changed. Lower, careful. Did your son ever mention a patent? The coffee cup slipped slightly in my hand. A patent? He filed one. His first year married. A valve system for precision manufacturing. Smart design. The kind of thing that could revolutionize how factories handle pressure regulation. I remembered. Derek had called me, excited, talking too fast. "Dad, I think I figured something out. Something big." That was the last time he'd sounded like himself. "What happened to the patent?" I asked. Marcus turned his screen toward me. "According to this, he signed it over to Holloway Property Holdings. Full transfer of rights. Worth about $2 million now, with licensing deals." $2 million? Give or take. Marcus zoomed in on the signature at the bottom of the transfer document. "But Gerald, look at this signature." I looked. It said Derek Whitmore in a neat, careful hand. "That's not his handwriting." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know. I've seen his real signature on his employment contracts. Different slant, different pressure, different everything." He closed the laptop. "Someone forged your son's name and stole his invention." The diners seemed to go quiet around me. The squeaky fan, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversations. All of it faded into white noise. A forged signature, a stolen patent, $2 million. And my son on his knees, scrubbing grout in a bathroom, believing he was worthless. A forged signature, a stolen invention. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? Imagine them taking everything.
My family. My daughter told me I won't hit 1,000 subscribers. Please, let's prove her wrong.
$2 million. That's what my son's invention was worth. And according to every legal document, he'd given it away for nothing. Except he hadn't signed those papers. Someone else had. The next morning, I drove back to my house in Hartford and went straight to the attic. 40 years of living in the same home means 40 years of boxes. Most of them held things Eleanor couldn't throw away. Report cards, Christmas ornaments, photographs with curled edges. But in the far corner, under a wool blanket that still smelled like mothballs, I found what I was looking for. A cardboard box labeled Derek, College and Work, in Eleanor's handwriting. Inside were notebooks, engineering sketches, ideas my son had scribbled on napkins, graph paper, the backs of grocery receipts. The kind of raw thinking that happens before an idea becomes real. And there it was. A stack of drawings held together with a rubber band, pencil on graph paper, coffee stain in the corner. Derek always worked with a mug beside him. Notes in his neat engineer's hand, the letters slanted slightly left the way he'd written since he was a kid. The valve system, his invention, dated 18 months before the patent transfer. I called Marcus that afternoon. He came over with a woman I'd never met, Doris Keller, a forensic handwriting expert who testified in over 200 cases. She spread the documents across my kitchen table. Derek's original sketches on one side, the patent transfer document on the other. She studied them with a magnifying glass, her eyes moving slowly, methodically. "The signatures don't match," she said finally. Her voice was flat, professional. "The one on the transfer is too smooth, too careful. Your son writes with pressure. You can see it in the indentations on the graph paper. But this signature?" She tapped the forged document. No pressure, no variation. Someone was copying, not writing. "Can you prove it in court?" "I can prove it anywhere." Marcus pulled out another folder. "There's more. The witnesses on the patent transfer. 2 names, both listed as employees of Holloway Property Holdings." He slid a printout toward me. I ran them through employment databases. Both were terminated within 2 weeks of signing. "Paid off and removed," I said. "That's my guess." Marcus leaned back. But here's the part that made me lose sleep. I pulled the metadata on the digital version of the transfer document. It was created on a Sunday evening, October 15th, 4 years ago. Something cold moved through my chest. October 15th. Does that date mean something to you? I walked back to the attic, dug through the box again until I found what I was looking for, a hospital wristband, faded but still readable. Gerald Whitmore. Admitted October 14th. Discharged October 16th. Diagnosis: exhaustion and dehydration. He was in the hospital, I said when I came back down. The night that document was created, my son was sedated in a hospital bed. He couldn't have signed anything. Marcus and Doris exchanged a look. Gerald, Marcus said slowly, Constance built this trap like you build flight systems. Redundancies, fail-safes, documentation that looks airtight until you start pulling threads. He paused, but she made one mistake. What mistake? She assumed no one was watching. He looked at me with something like respect. She forgot that fathers never stop. Before they left, Marcus handed me one more document. A draft version of the patent transfer, with tracked changes still visible. Someone had forgotten to delete the editing history. And there, in the margin, was a note. CH to finalize before Derek's release. CH Constance Holloway, her initials, her handwriting. Dated the morning my son was discharged from the hospital. She had forged his signature while he was lying in a hospital bed, too weak to know what was happening. She forged his signature while he was in a hospital bed. What would you call that? Strategy or cruelty? I needed to understand Vanessa. Was she a prisoner like Derek, or a warden wearing a wedding ring? The question had been eating at me since that first day in the marble bathroom. She wasn't there when Constance humiliated our son. She wasn't there to defend him. But did that make her guilty or just absent? I couldn't go after Constance without knowing where Vanessa stood. If she was a victim too, I needed to protect her. If she was part of the scheme, I needed to know that before I made my move. I called an old colleague from my aerospace days, Frank Morrison. His daughter ran in the same social circles as the Greenwich families. Country clubs, charity boards, the kind of world where everyone knows everyone's business but pretends they don't. Vanessa Holloway? Frank's daughter Meredith said over the phone. Sure, I know her. We were on the junior league together for 2 years. She paused. Sweet girl, sad eyes. Never seemed to have any money of her own, which was strange for a Holloway. What do you mean? I mean she never picked up a check, never bought anything without calling her mother first. Even her clothes. Constance approved everything. It was like watching a 30-year-old ask permission to exist. I sat at my kitchen table that night, surrounded by notes, photographs, and timelines. The blue ink of my handwriting covered pages and pages, connecting dots, building a map of destruction. A wedding photo sat in front of me. Derek and Vanessa on their big day. Derek was beaming, the kind of smile I hadn't seen on his face in years. But Vanessa? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Even on her wedding day, something was missing. Meredith had given me one more piece of information. Vanessa was engaged once before Derek, a young attorney named Bradley Simmons. The engagement lasted 8 months before it was suddenly called off. The rumor was that Constance ended it, Meredith said. Bradley refused to sign some kind of prenuptial agreement. Something about giving Constance financial oversight of their accounts. He walked away, and Vanessa never spoke to him again. Financial oversight. The same words that described what Constance had done to Derek. The pattern was becoming clear. Constance didn't find husbands for her daughter. She acquired employees, men she could control, manipulate, and discard when they stopped being useful. But there was one more thing I needed to know. I went through Derek's old phone records, the ones Marcus had pulled during the financial investigation. Most of the calls were to work or to Vanessa. But 18 months into the marriage, there was a cluster of calls to my number. I remembered those calls. Derek had sounded tired, distant. I'd asked if everything was okay, and he'd said yes. I believed him. Why wouldn't I believe my own son? But then the calls stopped. 3 weeks of silence, and when Derek finally reached out again, he was different, quieter, more careful with his words. I dug deeper into that 3-week period and found something that made my hands shake. A credit card charge, Hartford, Connecticut, a gas station on I-91. Derek had driven to Hartford. 18 months into his marriage, he'd gotten in his car and driven 2 hours toward home, toward me. But he never arrived. The next charge on his card was back in Greenwich. Same day. He'd turned around at the city limits and gone back. I called Meredith again. I need to know something. 18 months after Derek and Vanessa got married, was there any talk about problems? Anything about Vanessa being in trouble? Meredith was quiet for a long moment. There was a rumor, she finally said. Vanessa missed a few events. People said Constance was threatening to send her somewhere, a facility, for her nerves. But then everything went back to normal, and nobody talked about it again. A facility, for her nerves. I understood now. Derek tried to leave. He packed a bag, got in his car, and drove toward freedom. But somewhere on that highway, Vanessa called, crying, telling him that Constance was threatening to have her committed if he left. And my son, my good, decent, loyal son, turned around. Not for love, not for the marriage, but to protect his wife from her own mother. He sacrificed himself to save someone who couldn't save herself. He went back to protect her, and she let her mother destroy him anyway. Subscribe now, because recognizing manipulation before it takes root might save someone you love. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why below. I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the wedding photo. Vanessa wasn't innocent. She'd watched her mother destroy Derek for 4 years and said nothing. But she wasn't free either. Constance had trained her since childhood. The cage was invisible, but the bars were real. I made my decision that night. I would expose Constance. I would save Derek. And I would give Vanessa one chance, just one, to choose which side of history she wanted to stand on. Then Patricia called. Her voice was tighter than I'd ever heard it. Gerald, one of those sealed lawsuits just got quietly unsealed. You need to see what's inside. 2 sealed lawsuits, both settled quietly. What do you think the Holloways paid to keep hidden? The first lawsuit was from a contractor. The second was from a former son-in-law. Both told the same story. I drove to Patricia's office the next morning. She practiced out of a converted brownstone in New Haven. Wood-paneled walls, leather chairs. The kind of place where serious things got discussed in serious voices. Legal documents covered her mahogany desk. Years of deception compressed into paper and ink. The afternoon light cut through the courtroom-style blinds, casting stripes across the evidence. Patricia adjusted her reading glasses, the kind worn by people who've seen too many lies to be surprised anymore, and handed me the first file. Case 1, she said. Raymond Torres, independent contractor. He did renovation work for Holloway Property Holdings 8 years ago. I opened the file. Torres had accused Constance of forging his authorization on billing documents, then using those documents to charge work to his company instead of hers. When he objected, she sued him for the debt. He countersued for fraud. What happened? Settled for $200,000. Non-disclosure agreement. Torres couldn't talk about it, couldn't warn anyone, couldn't do anything except take the money and disappear. I set the file down. And the second case? Patricia slid another folder across the desk. Bradley Simmons, the attorney who was engaged to Vanessa before Derek. My stomach tightened. Meredith mentioned him. Then she didn't mention the whole story. Patricia leaned back. Bradley didn't just walk away from the engagement. He was pushed. Constance created documentation showing he'd taken a loan from Holloway Property Holdings, a loan he never asked for and never received. When he refused to sign the prenuptial agreement, she threatened to call the loan and destroy his credit. She manufactured debt. Exactly. Bradley sued for financial coercion. The case was sealed with a $350,000 settlement and a gag order. Patricia removed her glasses. Gerald, the language in both cases is almost identical to what you've discovered about Derek. Shell companies, forged documents, manufactured financial obligations. I stared at the two folders sitting side by side. Raymond Torres, Bradley Simmons. My son, 3 victims, same predator, same playbook. She's been doing this for years, I said slowly. Different people, different schemes, but always the same method, and no one stopped her because she paid them to stay quiet. Until now. Patricia's voice was steady. 1 case is a mistake, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern, and patterns destroy defenses. She pulled out a legal pad covered in her precise handwriting. I've already drafted a motion to freeze the patent royalties. We can file Monday. That prevents Constance from moving the money offshore before we can claim it. Monday? I turned the word over in my mind. That's 4 days away. Is there a problem with Monday? I thought about the invitation I'd seen on social media. The Holloway Foundation's annual charity gala, 300 guests. Constance delivering the keynote speech, all of Greenwich society gathered in one room to celebrate the family's generosity. The gala is Saturday, I said. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking of attending? I'm thinking of doing more than attending. She studied me for a long moment. I kept my expression calm, the same expression I'd worn in that marble bathroom while Constance laughed about my son. Gerald, Patricia said carefully, a public confrontation could complicate the legal case. Or it could end it. I stood up. You take payment for silence, Patricia. I don't. I take justice. She was quiet for a moment. Then a small smile crossed her face. The kind of smile Eleanor used to give me when I was being stubborn about something important. File the motion Friday, I said. Make sure it's approved before Saturday night. And what will you be doing Saturday night? I picked up the folders. Torres, Simmons, years of victims paid to disappear. I'm going to a party, I said, and I'm bringing a gift. 300 witnesses. 1 keynote speech. What would you bring to that party? A glass of champagne or an envelope full of truth? I pressed my suit that night. The charcoal one Eleanor bought me for our anniversary. I hadn't worn it since her funeral. It seemed fitting for another kind of ending. The closet still smelled like cedar and old cologne. Eleanor's dresses hung on the other side, untouched for 6 years. I couldn't bring myself to donate them. Some days I'd open the closet just to remember. The suit had a dry cleaning tag still attached. I turned it over and felt my throat tighten. Eleanor's handwriting. G, you look handsome, always. E. She'd written notes like that on everything. Lunch bags, birthday cards, the margins of crossword puzzles. Little messages that said, I see you, I love you, I'm here. I held the tag for a long time. Then I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to Derek. I didn't accuse anyone. Didn't list the evidence. Didn't try to explain 4 years of investigation in a few paragraphs. I just told him the truth. Derek, I know what they did to you. I have proof. Tomorrow night at the gala, I'm going to get you free. You just need to be there. I love you. Your mother loves you. And no matter what they made you believe, you were never worthless. Dad? I sealed the envelope and drove to Greenwich. The roads were empty at midnight. Just me and the highway and the mechanical hum of the Buick. The same drive I'd made weeks ago, chasing a voicemail. But this time, I knew what waited at the other end. The Holloway estate looked different in the dark. The hedges were shadows. The iron gates were black bars against the sky. No lights in the windows, just a house full of secrets. Sleeping. I parked down the street and walked to the service entrance. The same door I'd used the first time. The gravel crunched under my shoes, too loud in the silence. I slipped the envelope under the door and watched it disappear into darkness. Then I stood there, alone, wondering if I was doing the right thing. What if Derek was too broken to fight? What if 4 years of psychological destruction had erased the son I knew? What if he opened that letter, read my words, and handed it straight to Constance? What if he chose his prison over freedom, because freedom meant admitting how much he'd lost? I thought about the day I taught him to ride a bike. He was 7, stubborn, determined to figure it out himself. He must have fallen 30 times that afternoon, scraping his knees, biting his lip to keep from crying. But he never quit. And when he finally made it to the end of the driveway without falling, he turned around with a grin so wide, it split his whole face. You're going to fall, son, I told him at the start. But I'll be right here when you do. I was still here, 30 years later, still waiting to catch him. I drove home in silence. No radio, no thoughts. Just the road and the hope that my son would read that letter and remember who he used to be. When I got back to Hartford, I sat in the kitchen with Eleanor's photograph. I should have seen it sooner, I said to her. The signs were there, the silence, the distance. I should have pushed harder, asked more questions, done something before it got this bad. The photograph didn't answer. It never did. But sometimes, in the quiet, I could almost hear her voice. I'll fix it now, I said. I promise you I'll bring our boy home. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Greenwich area code, a text message, 2 words. I'll be there. It was Derek's old phone number, the one I thought he'd thrown away 4 years ago. He'd kept it, hidden somewhere Constance couldn't find it. A tiny act of resistance. A thread connecting him to the life he used to have. And now he was telling me he'd fight. 2 words. After years of silence. What would those words mean to you? 300 guests in black tie. Crystal chandeliers throwing light across silk gowns and polished shoes. Champagne towers rising like monuments to excess. A string quartet playing something soft and expensive in the corner. And me, 71 years old, charcoal suit, manila envelope tucked inside my jacket. An envelope that was about to end a dynasty. I'd gotten the invitation through Patricia, a friend of a friend who owed her a favor. No questions asked. Just a printed card with my name in gold letters, granting me access to the most exclusive event in Greenwich. The Holloway Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Celebrating family values. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I entered through the main doors and blended into the crowd. At my age, in a decent suit, I looked like a dozen other retired executives, wealthy enough to be here, forgettable enough to ignore, perfect. I watched Constance work the room. She was magnetic. I'll give her that. Moving from group to group like a queen surveying her court. Touching arms, leaning in close, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny. Every gesture calculated, every smile a performance. The guests adored her. How could they not? She was giving away money tonight, funding hospitals, building playgrounds, making speeches about community and compassion while my son scrubbed her bathroom floors. I picked up a glass of water. I needed steady hands, and found a spot near the back of the ballroom. Waited. At 8 o'clock, the string quartet fell silent. A spotlight swung toward the stage. Constance climbed the steps to the podium, her emerald dress catching the light like armor. "Good evening," she began. Her voice filled the room, warm, confident, practiced. "Thank you all for being here tonight. The Holloway Foundation exists because of your generosity, because you believe, as I do, in the power of family, in the importance of legacy, in the value of integrity." I let her talk. Let her build her monument of lies, brick by brick. "My late husband built this foundation on a simple principle," Constance continued. "That wealth means nothing unless it serves others. That legacy is measured not in dollars, but in lives changed." I started walking. The crowd didn't notice at first. Just an old man in a charcoal suit moving between tables. But as I got closer to the stage, heads began to turn. Whispers rippled outward like stones dropped in water. Constance saw me when I was 10 feet from the podium. Her speech faltered just for a second. Just a hitch in her breath before she recovered. "And tonight," she continued, her eyes locked on mine, "we celebrate the next chapter of—" I stepped onto the stage. The room went silent. 300 pairs of eyes fixed on the space between us, the old man and the queen, facing each other under a spotlight that suddenly felt like an interrogation lamp. "Excuse me," Constance said, her voice sharp. "This is a private event." I reached into my jacket, pulled out the manila envelope, extended it toward her with a steady hand. "I believe this belongs to my son." One envelope, one sentence. Years of theft exposed in seconds. Subscribe now, because the next time someone steals what's yours, you'll want to know how to take it back. If you wouldn't fight back, tell me why below. Constance stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. The rustle of silk and tuxedos filled the silence. Ice clinked in glasses. Someone coughed. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said quietly, "but this is not the time or place. Open it." She didn't move. "Open it," I repeated, "or I will." Her hand trembled, just slightly, just enough for me to notice, as she took the envelope. She broke the seal, pulled out the documents inside. I watched her face as she read them. The court order freezing the patent royalties. The forensic report proving the signature was forged. Derek's original engineering sketches, dated and authenticated. The hospital admission record proving he couldn't have signed the transfer because he was sedated in a bed. And at the bottom, a copy of her own handwritten note. CH to finalize before Derek's release. The color drained from Constance's face. Her mask cracked, just for an instant. and I saw the panic underneath, the calculation, the desperate search for an exit that didn't exist. "This is ridiculous," she managed. "These documents are authentic," I said. "Verified by a federal judge. Filed with the court this afternoon." I let that sink in. "It's over, Constance." The room was perfectly still. 300 witnesses. 300 people who had spent years believing in Constance Holloway's generosity, her integrity, her family values. Now they were watching her empire crumble. I heard movement at the back of the ballroom. Footsteps, someone walking forward. I turned. Derek stood near the entrance, still wearing the servant's clothes I'd last seen him in. But something was different. His shoulders were straight. His chin was up. His eyes, his mother's eyes, were clear for the first time in years. He started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone. Whispers followed his path. "Who is that? Is that the son-in-law? What happened to him?" Derek climbed the steps and stopped beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, father and son, while Constance's world burned around her. Then one person in the back of the room started clapping, slowly, deliberately. The sound echoed in the silence. Another person joined, then another. The applause spread through the ballroom like a wave, building from scattered claps to something that sounded almost like justice. Constance stood frozen at the podium, the envelope shaking in her hands. And Derek, my son, spoke for the first time in months. "Hi, Dad." His voice cracked. "I read your letter." I put my hand on his shoulder, felt the bones through his shirt, too thin, too fragile, but still there, still standing. "Let's go home," I said. He could have exposed her with a lawsuit. Instead, he chose her stage, her audience, her moment. Was that justice or revenge?
My family. My daughter told me I won't hit 1,000 subscribers. Please, let's prove her wrong.
The settlement offer arrived in 72 hours. 7 figures. Enough to make most people forget. Derek didn't even open the envelope. The Holloway lawyers came in fast and heavy. 3 days after the gala, a courier appeared at Patricia's office with a packet thick as a phone book. Legal language, financial projections, non-disclosure agreements with enough clauses to fill a cemetery. Patricia spread the documents across her desk and let out a low whistle. $1.4 million, full NDA, sealed records, and a public statement that all parties have reconciled their differences and wish each other well. Derek sat across from her, his hands resting on his knees. Those hands were still healing, the cracks in his knuckles slowly closing, the redness fading to pink. Months of scrubbing bathroom tiles had left marks that would take years to disappear completely. But his eyes were different, clearer, focused. "What do you think?" Patricia asked him. Derek didn't even glance at the papers. "I don't want their money." "Derek," Patricia said carefully, $1.4 million is... I know what it is." His voice was steady, not angry, just certain. "It's the price they think my silence costs. It's what they believe I'm worth when I agree to pretend none of this happened." He shook his head. "I don't want their money. I want my name." I sat in the corner of that office, watching my son, and felt something loosen in my chest. This was the boy I raised, the one who stood in the rain, fixing a bike tire the day after his mother's funeral, the one who solved problems instead of running from them. The man who'd been scrubbing grout in a marble bathroom. That was a lie they built on top of him. A costume they forced him to wear until he forgot there was anything underneath. But the costume was off now. and my son was still there. "What do you want instead?" Patricia asked. Derek leaned forward. "The patent goes back in my name. Every dollar of royalties they collected gets returned, plus interest. Constance Holloway is barred from any future business dealings involving my work." He paused. "And a public apology. Read into the court record, something my children, if I ever have them, can find someday." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "They'll never agree to a public apology." "Then we go to trial." Derek's jaw tightened. "They didn't just steal from me. They tried to make me believe I had nothing worth stealing, that I was worthless, that the only thing I could do right was clean their floors." His voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. "I need the world to know that wasn't true. I need it on paper. Forever." Patricia looked at me. I nodded. She turned back to Derek with the first real smile I'd seen on her face since this began. "That's a Whitmore answer." The counteroffer went out that afternoon. We gave the Holloways 1 week to respond. On day 6, Patricia called. "They've agreed to everything," she said. Her voice had that careful tone lawyers use when there's a catch coming. "But there's a condition." "What condition?" "Constance wants to deliver the apology herself, in person, to Derek." I looked at my son. He was standing by the window of my Hartford home, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where he grew up. His shoulders were tense, but his breathing was even. "What do you want?" I asked him. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Let her come." He could have taken the money and disappeared. Instead, he demanded his name. "What would you have chosen, the check or the truth?" She read from a script, 23 sentences. Each one a blade she'd been forced to hold by the handle, cutting only herself. The conference room at Patricia's firm was designed for moments like this. Long mahogany table, leather chairs, blinds that filtered the light into something neutral and official. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised over her machine, ready to record every word. Derek sat on one side of the table. I sat beside him. Patricia stood near the window, arms crossed, watching. And then Constance Holloway walked in. She was still perfectly dressed. Navy suit. Pearl earrings, hair arranged like it had been for the gala. But something was different. Something behind her eyes had gone hollow, like a house with the lights turned off. She didn't look at any of us as she took her seat. Just placed a single sheet of paper on the table and smoothed it flat with hands that trembled, just slightly, just enough to notice. A water glass sat in front of her. She never touched it. "Whenever you're ready," Patricia said. Constance took a breath. Then she began to read. "I, Constance Holloway, hereby acknowledge and apologize for the following actions taken against Derek Whitmore." The scratch of the court reporter's keys filled the silence between sentences. Each word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. She acknowledged the forged signature on the patent transfer. She acknowledged the financial manipulation, funneling Derek's salary into accounts he couldn't access, listing him as a dependent on household documents, erasing his professional identity on official forms. She acknowledged the psychological harm, the isolation, the systematic destruction of his self-worth. 23 sentences, 4 years of theft, abuse, and erasure, compressed into legal language and read aloud in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. Derek listened without moving. His breathing was slow, controlled, patient. The same breathing I'd taught him when he was a kid, learning to shoot free throws. "Steady hands come from steady lungs," I used to say. He'd learned that lesson well. The composure he'd been forced to develop during years of humiliation had become armor. She couldn't touch him now. Constance finished the script, set the paper down, and then, unexpectedly, she looked directly at Derek. "I underestimated you," she said. Her voice was different now. Rawer. "Both of you." It wasn't in the script. Patricia stiffened slightly, but didn't interrupt. Derek met her gaze, held it, and when he spoke, his voice was calm as still water. "You didn't underestimate us. You just never looked." Constance flinched, actually flinched, like the words had struck her physically. "You could have taken the money and vanished," she said quietly. "Why make me do this?" Derek was silent for a moment. Then, "Because my children, if I ever have them, will be able to find this record. They'll be able to read these words and know exactly what happened. They'll know their father was not what you tried to make him." Constance had no response to that. She simply signed the final document, her hand shaking as the pen moved across the page, and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. Derek sat perfectly still for a full minute. I didn't speak. Patricia didn't speak. The court reporter's keys had gone silent. Then my son turned to me and asked the question I'd been waiting 4 years to hear. "Dad, can we go home?" 23 sentences. 4 years of theft, abuse, and erasure, reduced to words on paper. Was it enough? The first night Derek slept in his old room, I heard him crying at 3 a.m. I didn't go in. Some doors you don't open. But I sat in the hallway until he stopped. Recovery doesn't happen in a straight line. I learned that when Eleanor was sick. There are good days and bad days. Days when progress feels real. And days when everything slides backward into darkness. The first week was hard. Derek moved into his old room, the same room he'd had since high school, with the same faded posters on the walls and the same squeaky floorboard near the closet. He barely spoke, took long showers, ate meals in silence, pushing food around his plate like he'd forgotten how hunger worked. I didn't push him. I recognized the signs of someone reassembling themselves, piece by piece, from wreckage they didn't cause. Instead, I made coffee every morning and left a cup outside his door. I cooked dinner every night and set 2 places at the table. I waited. The hallway floor creaked outside his room at night. Sometimes I heard him pacing. Sometimes I heard nothing at all, which was almost worse. But slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, things began to change. One morning, I found Derek in the garage, standing over a box I'd forgotten existed. His old engineering notebooks, sketches from college, ideas he'd scribbled on napkins and graph paper before the world got complicated. He was holding one of the notebooks, turning the pages slowly, like he was meeting an old friend. "I used to be pretty good at this," he said quietly. It was the most he'd spoken in days. "You still are," I said. He didn't argue, just nodded and took the notebook inside. That night, I found him at the kitchen table with a pencil in his hand, sketching something on the back of an envelope. The lines were rough, uncertain, but they were there. He was building again. A week later, Derek knocked on my workbench door while I was sorting through old tools. "Dad, can I ask you something?" I looked up. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, one for each of us. The first time he'd made coffee since he came home. "Ask me anything." "The guidance systems you designed, the ones for the 747 stabilizers, how did you solve the feedback loop problem? I've been reading your old notes, but I can't figure out the math." I stared at him. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. Not about Constance. Not about the lawsuit. Just a son asking his father to explain something complicated. "Pull up a chair," I said. "This might take a while." We talked for 3 hours that night, about engineering, about Eleanor, about the years we'd lost and the years we might still have. At some point, Derek stopped and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes for a long time. Clarity, presence. "Dad," he said, "I'm sorry for disappearing. For not calling, for letting them—" I cut him off. "You didn't disappear. You were taken. There's a difference." He blamed himself for years. Most victims do. Subscribe now, because understanding how manipulation works is the first step to escaping it. If you've seen this pattern before, share your story below. Derek didn't argue. He just nodded. And for the first time since I'd found him on his knees in that marble bathroom, I think he actually believed it. 2 months passed. Derek started consulting for a small aerospace firm. Nothing major, just contract work to get his feet back under him. He was rebuilding, slowly, steadily, the way Whitmore men do. Then one afternoon, he came into the kitchen holding an envelope. The return address was the Holloway estate, but the handwriting wasn't Constance's. It was Vanessa's. After everything, Vanessa reaches out. What could she possibly want to say? Her letter was 3 pages long. I read it twice before I understood. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for directions. Derek handed it to me without a word. The paper was expensive, the kind Constance probably picked out. But the handwriting was shaky, elegant but uncertain. There were ink blots where Vanessa's hand had paused, like she'd been gathering courage between sentences. The letter sat on my kitchen table, read and reread, while Derek stared out the window at nothing. Vanessa's confession was simple. She knew what her mother had been doing, had known for years. She'd been too afraid to stop it, too trapped in her own invisible cage to reach through the bars and help someone else. "I watched her destroy you," she wrote, "and I told myself I had no choice. That if I spoke up, she would destroy me too. I was a coward. I know that now. But the gala had changed something. Watching Derek stand beside his father, watching Constance's empire crack in front of 300 witnesses. It had shown Vanessa that escape was possible, that the bars weren't as solid as she'd believed. She wasn't asking Derek to take her back, wasn't asking for reconciliation or a second chance. She was asking for one thing only, the name of a lawyer. "I need to get out," she wrote. "I don't know how. I don't know who to trust. But you found people who helped you fight. Maybe they can help me run." Derek sat down across from me. His face was unreadable. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. I chose my words carefully. "That's your decision, son, not mine." "But if it were you?" I thought about Vanessa. About the wedding photo where her smile didn't reach her eyes, about the rumor that Constance had threatened to commit her to a facility, about the first fiancé who'd been driven away by manufactured debt and legal threats. She was trapped in the same house. I said slowly. The bars were just different. Derek was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up, found a blank note card in the kitchen drawer, and sat back down with a pen. I watched his hand hover over the paper, deciding. He wrote 3 words, Patricia Vance, Escarissa, then added a phone number beneath it. No personal message, no absolution, no door opened wider than it needed to be. "She was part of it," Derek said as he sealed the note card in an envelope. "I can't forget that. I won't forget that." He paused. "But she's also trying to get out." and I won't be the one who locks the door behind me. I nodded, said nothing. But inside, I felt something like pride. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind a father feels when his son chooses mercy without weakness. 6 months later, Vanessa filed for divorce. She didn't ask for settlement, didn't try to claim any part of the Holloway fortune. She walked away with nothing but her freedom and the clothes in her suitcase. She didn't contact Derek again, not directly. But Patricia called us with news. In her divorce filing, Vanessa had included a statement. 5 sentences that changed everything. I was complicit in financial crimes and psychological abuse against my former husband, Gerald Whitmore. I was aware of forged documents, stolen assets, and systematic manipulation carried out by my mother, Constance Holloway. I asked the court's permission to testify against her in any future civil or criminal proceedings. Constance Holloway's attorneys went silent. The game was finally over. She turned against her own mother to testify. Was that courage or survival? The diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Same squeaky ceiling fan, same sticky vinyl booths, same coffee that tasted like it had survived something. We sat in the same spot we used to after Little League games, and for a moment, nothing else existed. 1 year had passed since the gala. 1 year since I'd handed Constance Holloway an envelope and watched her world collapse. 1 year since my son stood beside me and remembered how to breathe. Derek looked different now. Healthy. His hands had healed, still calloused, but from real work, not from scrubbing tile. He was consulting for 2 aerospace firms, building a reputation, rebuilding a life. On his wrist, he wore a watch I recognized. Silver band. Simple face. Eleanor had given it to him the day he graduated from UConn. He'd stopped wearing it somewhere during the marriage. Probably because Constance told him it wasn't nice enough. But now it was back. The patent royalties had been restored. $2 million plus interest. Derek donated a quarter of it to a fund for survivors of domestic abuse. They helped people like me get out, he'd said. Seems right to help them keep doing it. The rest went into savings, into a future he was finally allowed to have. We didn't talk about Constance over breakfast, didn't talk about the lawsuit or the apology or the years of darkness. We talked about other things, about Eleanor. The way she used to burn toast every Sunday morning and pretend she meant to. The sound of her laugh when Derek told bad jokes. The notes she left everywhere. Lunch bags, birthday cards, dry cleaning tags. Little messages that said, I see you, I love you, I'm here. About the future. Derek had met someone, a fellow engineer named Grace, who worked at one of the firms he consulted for. She treats me like I matter, he'd said when he first told me about her. Like my ideas are worth hearing. That's the minimum, I'd replied. Make sure it stays the maximum, too. He'd laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in years, and promised he would. The waitress brought our check. Same waitress who'd been here 20 years ago, a little grayer now, but still quick with the coffee pot. She didn't know our story. Didn't know that the 2 men in the corner booth had just finished fighting a war. To her, we were just a father and son eating bacon and eggs on a Saturday morning. And maybe that was the point. Derek reached for his wallet, but I waved him off. This one's on me. Dad, you've paid for enough. Then let me pay for this. I smiled. Next time it's your turn. He nodded. Deal. We walked out into the parking lot, same as we'd done 1,000 times when Derek was young. The sun was slanting low over Hartford, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Colors Eleanor would have loved. Colors she would have tried to capture in one of her watercolors. back when she still had the strength to paint. Derek stopped at his car, turned back to me. Dad. Yeah? Thank you. His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. You came for me. When I couldn't come for myself, when I didn't even know I needed saving. He paused. You came anyway. I felt my throat tighten. That's what fathers do, son. That's what Whitmore men do. He nodded, looked down at his feet, then back up at me. Dad, he said, I'm proud of you. I didn't correct him. Didn't say it should be the other way around. Some words you just let stand because they're too important to argue with. I just nodded. Climbed into my old Buick, started the engine, and drove home with the windows down, breathing in the first clean air I'd tasted in years. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For the next person who needs to hear that it's never too late to fight for someone you love. Drop the one line you'll carry with you in the comments. Tell me which moment hit you the hardest. And remember, quiet justice isn't weak. It's just patient. What does it take to rebuild what someone tried to erase? A father who wouldn't stop looking, a son who remembered how to stand, and a truth that refused to stay buried.